Strack.
Here.
Weedman. Here. Mack.
Here.
LaCroix.
Here.
Mesco.
Here.
Braden. Here.
That's a quorum. Let's recite the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda? Are there any questions? Any questions? Okay.
Mesco.
Aye.
Strack.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
Weedman.
Aye.
Braden. Aye. LaCroix.
Aye. Motion carries. Do we have any public comments? Okay. Then we'll move right into our technology proposal.
I'd like to introduce Bill Supplementary from Single Chat, who's going to
We need to move, right?
talk to us about what we've been interested in help leading our tech committee and looking at the possibility of us recommending a one-to-one. So he's going to go through those slides with us. Folks, I got to turn this on. Here's the text.
This is always the hardest thing. I'm going to as soon as I Well, good evening. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. As my name again is Bill Supplementary, and I'm with Single Path. We're a technology students too. I don't know if I can speak that softly to talk to everyone.
I can adjust it though.
Okay. So my name is Bill Spakowski. I'm with an organization here in Chicago called Single Path. And we're a technology firm that works with a lot of districts when they're looking at how do they better infuse technology and gain a return on investment for the technology that they're trying to bring into the district. And when I talk about return on investment, we're not talking about, hey, we're going to save money or it's going to decrease printing. Some of those things might happen, but the ROI that you're looking from at a district leadership perspective is it improving the academic growth of our students? That's what we're really trying to focus with and help the district figure out what they want to do with the integration of technology and how it better will help student performance moving forward as we introduce more technology. One thing I'll tell you, I get to work with a lot of school districts across the state. And I don't say this at every board meeting, but it probably sounds like I would. You have an amazing district here. The staff that I've had an opportunity to work with, your administrators, your teachers, we have students on our tech committee, we have parents from the community on our tech committee. Amazing, amazing group to work with. So I think you as a board need to commend yourself for the quality of people that are here has something to do with the board that's leading this organization. So a job well done, and again, it's exciting to be here. So let's talk a little bit about what we've been doing and how we've been doing it. One of the things we try to do when we work with our school districts is say, okay, if we're going to integrate technology, how do we make sure whatever we do is done right? And I don't know if anybody on the board is familiar with Project Red. It was a study done of 1,000 school districts that went one-to-one across the country. And in those districts, regardless of social or economic background, what they found out is that only 33% of the schools that went one-to-one were successful, meaning that they saw student achievement by going into this. So what this study showed us was basically what they called out, and they said, hey, what made those 33% different from the 67 that failed? And what they identified is that there were 8 key steps that you need to follow in order to make sure that you're successful with implementing a one-to-one environment. And the first thing is planning. And then it talks about leadership, technology infrastructure, professional development, communication, policies and procedures, expectation setting, and evaluation. And those are the 8 key steps. So when we work with our districts, we try to answer all of those, and we have a project plan around executing against all of those. And it has somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1,600 tasks in it when we look at the project plan from start to finish. And what I've bolded for you here is probably some of the ones that are the biggest component to making one-to-one successful. So having a solid plan. We have that because we're taking it from Project Red and the lessons learned nationally. And also, we've helped in the state of Illinois, 20 school districts launch one-to-one in the neighborhood of something like 40,000 Chromebooks and iPads and Apple devices over the past 6 years. So we've done this a lot. We've taken the Project Red model, we've made it more Illinois-ish, and then we also make it more district-ish. So we say, how is it going to work in Grays Lake? Because what we did in Lamont may not be the same thing. So we have to make it specific for those districts as we start to work with them. But some of the key is, once we have the plan, we have to really look at what's going to make us successful. And when we look at it, it'll catch up eventually. When we look at it, some of the things that are required is expectation setting. So once we put the devices in our students' hands, what are we expecting our teachers to do with it? What are the goals? And those goals can't be a 5-year goal, but we have to look at it in 6-month or semester increments and say, okay, as we're going to implement technology, what are we going to expect our staff to do over the next 6 months? Once we've identified what those goals are, they have to be achievable, number one, but they also have to push the envelope a little bit so that our staff are becoming more proficient with the technology that they're using. Once we've understand those expectations for both staff and students, now we can truly define what we have to do from a professional development standpoint. Because Harvard School of Business did a study a few years ago and says, if you don't tell people why they're going to professional development, don't send them. Because they won't gain anything out of it. And I think everybody can probably attest to a PD that you went to for your work somewhere and no one told you why you were going, and you ended up sitting through it and you're like, okay, what am I going to do with this? And maybe the light bulb came on a month and a half later that said, oh, that's why I went to that class. Well, what we want to do is make sure that we match all of that stuff up in the beginning. And then how are we going to, once we've got our PD now, how are we going to evaluate that we're meeting our expectations, that our professional development is doing what we needed to do, and this is an ongoing cycle that allows us to continue that churn to success. This is a process. This is not deploy and walk away. This is deploy, and it's going to take us 3 to 5 years to get to where our final journey is going to take us. But each day that we delay that deployment puts us one step farther away from 5 years from now where we want to be. I just wanted to give you a little background on the process. Any questions on it? So one of the things we did is we went out and we built a committee that was going to follow us with this process. And what I've put up in here is the different committee members, and we have them broken down into subcommittees, and they're working on smaller bits of the project plan. So there's a communication subcommittee. We have a curriculum and instruction. Let me give you a little background on that. That doesn't mean they're making choices on math or science curriculum. They're looking at the curriculum that we currently have and that we use in the district, and they're saying, how do we infuse more technology where it's appropriate? Not everywhere, but where it's appropriate. We have a finance subcommittee. We've got the professional development subcommittee and the technology subcommittee. And the technology subcommittee, if you're saying, what are they doing? They're kind of looking at the stuff. They're looking at the devices, they're looking at, do we have enough plumbing, internet access, Wi-Fi, all of those types of things. They're evaluating that. How are we going to support this when it's done? What's it going to take once we roll these out? So they're looking at all of those different features. So the committee came up with a vision, because Project Red said, if you don't define why we're doing this, you're not going to be successful. And this is really what the technology committee came up with as a vision for the integration of technology. And basically, it's our district is committed to the balanced use of technology to enhance learning, maximize individual growth, and prepare our learning community for the future. And I think there's a couple of things that are important in that. When we say our learning community, it's not just about our students. It's about our staff. It's about our parents. Because this is going to change everybody's role as far as their partnership with education here in the district. And then from there, we created the belief statements, and these are really the goals that we're trying to make sure that that come out of this. And basically, this is our what we believe, and we're trying to keep it to 4. Actually, we've got 5 goals because that's kind of what is manageable, and that's what we're striving for. So all the work that we're doing is to ensure that the technologies and tools to enhance learning and prepare our students for the future. Technology with a balance of other educational tools is to maximize individual growth. Ongoing technology professional development is essential. Variety of technology to provide a consistent environment where learning occurs. And I really think that the last one is really a great one. It talks about the responsibility and digital citizenship. And that's not, again, just about our students. That's about our community. That's about our parents. The world's changing. It's a digital world today, and we have to make sure that the students that are leaving in 8th grade, when they move on to the high school level, that we're making them digital citizens. Remember, they're the digital native, we're not, right? We're trying to catch up in this world and understand the stuff that's native to them. So I think these were great goals that the committee came up with. And then a little bit about the timeline. Can't really read it clear here, but I'm trying to take some maybe if you were to look at a project plan and you look at kind of some critical path kind of stuff, some of the things that we have to execute against to look at what our recommendation would be. But one of the things in there is an introduction to the board in the month of October. We're here. We made that one. We're on time. And as we continue to go through, we talk about town hall meetings next month and professional development, board approval, distribution night, and we've just to give you an idea that we've got it planned out, we've got marching orders, we're following a process, and it's a process that's recognized and it has been successful. So what are our recommendations? Chromebook devices, 1-to-1, 3rd through 8th grade, to be launched in February of 2019. What else is needed with that? We're looking at a warranty on the Chromebooks, a white glove service, content filtering, and classroom management tools. And then the committee was looking at what are we doing in kindergarten through 2nd, and this does include pre-K, not just kindergarten, but we're looking at using the existing district devices to supplement what we're trying to do in the lower grades. For instance, we have, I think the number I heard today is that we have 1,024 Chromebooks in the district. Or not Chromebooks, I'm sorry, iPads, sorry. And in our grades, kindergarten through 2nd grade, we have roughly around 1,200 students. So if we can take those 1,000 iPads and we find out that 600 of them or 700 of them aren't at end of life, okay, and that we can continue to use them in the education, that will help us supplement and support the 2-to-1 in the grade levels, kindergarten through 2nd grade. So we're trying to also be responsible with the devices that we have and see where we can put them in the district so that we're not losing the value of what we've paid for at this point in time. We're also looking at the existing Chromebooks that we have in the district to be kind of our bench for the newer ones we're going to buy, okay, because there's going to be times where a student forgets a Chromebook. There's going to be times where a student's Chromebook needs repaired. We have to be able to give them something to use so that education doesn't stop when we're integrating technology into the lessons that they're experiencing that day. Make sense so far? Any questions? I must be good. So what does a cost look like? This is where, okay, now we'll have all kinds of questions. So that I got to enlarge.
Did we get the nearest bank of lights shut off? Maybe that's
Yeah, I'm sorry. I made the wrong decision there.
Well, we do have a question. We're looking at push this in February.
Yes, sir.
Why not sooner in the there's really February, March, April, May, we're getting out in June.
Correct. That's a great question. So there's a lot of the districts that we've worked with have done mid-year launches. And the reason for it is it gives us, when we set teacher expectation for the second half of the school year, the expectations could be slightly lower. And it gives us a chance to then evaluate where we are so that our summer professional development for next school year has more meat to it, because we've got some lessons learned in that 2 to 3 month window as a school year is ending. So it helps us from a professional development. It helps our experience. And one of the things I've learned by going through this with so many school districts, launching new devices in August with a brand new class is a really hard thing to do at the beginning of the school year.
No, I get that. So I guess my question is, why not January, why February? Why not after break?
So we're kind of looking at the timeline to get through the board process, okay, get devices ordered.
We can certainly work.
We can certainly move it up.
I mean, I was just saying the more they have it in their hands to use for the year, the more data you get to figure out where we're at towards the end of the year to work on professional development.
We can certainly work on that.
Yes.
I'm just asking.
That's a good point.
I assume there was a reason.
The reason was a cycle. You know, introduction to a board meeting, second board meeting for process, getting approval, then placing order, okay, and then getting them in and making sure that we can get them distributed. That we're picking that second date or that in the February launch as where we were trying to put a line in the sand as last possible. It's obviously with the right direction we could start to pull that stuff forward. Now I'm not going to say we could do it by December 1st,
No.
okay, but it might be something that we might be able to. What's that? It might be something that we could look at moving that date up. A lot of our schools either hand them out right before, like we're thinking the end of February, because then when students go on break, they have their device with them. You know, there's a lot of things that it's not as new as we start to get back after that.
Well, we will start having our parent forums in November. So, you know, it may be possible to start do it in January.
Yeah, I was just saying the more data.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Cool.
So when we were looking at what the cost for the implementation is going to be, we did some numbers, and it looks like for 3rd through 8th grade, 1-to-1 is going to be about 2,500 units that we're going to have to purchase. We have been looking at some different units, but one of the ones we're building our model based on is one I have here that you can take a look at. It's the Lenovo 500E. And one of the beauties of this is as we look at what device we want to use moving forward, we want to make sure that if this is a device that we're recommending we're going to keep for a minimum of 3 years, is that we have to future-proof the device as much as we can. Not the functionality we're going to use in February or March when we hand these out, but the functionality we might need 2 years from now. So when we look at the devices that we're looking at, they're a Chromebook that can go into a tablet mode. It has the world camera, so it can do things like an iPad 10. So now I can hold my device and I can take pictures this way with it. I still have the keyboard functionality. It's a touch screen. It gives you the ability to use a stylus, so as we start to think about math, we can actually do handwritten math problems on this screen rather than typing it or still working in the paper. So what we're trying to do is look at a device that can be as future ready as possible. So we made some assumptions when bringing this projected cost to you is a device like this, okay, and this hasn't 100% been selected yet, but a device this type with these features would run us based on our quantity about $295 a unit. And I can leave this here if you want to take a look. It's just set up right now in test mode, so really all you can do is probably surf the internet. You can just type in the URL if you want to change. Back to Google.
So we'll go to 5th through 8th?
What's that?
So we'll go to 5th through 8th?
3rd through 8th. Yes. So, and then the one thing that we've got in the budget right now is a white glove treatment. So what that means is that the devices would come to us asset tagged, student labeled. They would be checked out of the box, so we wouldn't get any of that dead on arrival stuff. It would all be tested for us. They'd come to us when I say dead on arrival, if anybody understands in technology, if you order a lot of stuff, there's going to be a percentage that just don't work when they come out of the box. So what they'll do is they'll test all of this stuff for us, they'll validate it works, and then they'll provide it to us with an inventory spreadsheet that says, okay, here's who we assigned this one to, serial number, MAC address, and it makes it much easier for our technology department to enroll it into our Google domain. So that's what that white glove treatment would be. That's a one-time fee. It would be when we purchase them the first time. The other thing we're recommending is the device warranty, and that's a $54 fee for 3 years. And what that does is it warranties the device for everything except the screen. Because these screens are high definition and they're touch screens, none of the manufacturers today warranty the screen. They'll warranty everything else about it, but they're not going to warranty the screen. So there is a $100 charge, and that's something that the committee's working on. How does that get taken care of if there is screen damage? But the $54 will cover everything else. Keyboard, cracks in the case, hinges breaking, okay? Any of those types of things will be addressed through the warranty, just not a cracked screen. We're also looking at, we're going to need the Chromebook Management. What that really is that's Google's device license. So if anybody's familiar with the Microsoft network, you've got CALs that you have to purchase to be part of a Microsoft network at your corporation. So in order to be part of the Google domain within the district, that's the one thing that we have to pay for from Google, and that cost right now is $26 a unit. So we've added that. So then when we put all of those things into the device, we're looking at a total of about $382 per device. The total cost would be that 900,000 number, but if we put it on a 3-year fair market value lease, and this is projections, okay, you're looking at about $318,000 or $319,000 a year for the devices. Some other things that we still have to work on and fill out throughout our budget is we're looking at this comparison. Did we have any money set aside in the budget for one-to-one? Okay, that can be part of this. You know, we'll plug some of those numbers in to clean this up, and then it'll tell us where we are over or under in that. The other thing I want to make sure that you understand when we look at the budget is that right now, I have not factored into the budget, the projections, any type of fee. So right now, that would be the cost. If your district did no technology fee, that's what the cost for the devices on a 3-year lease would be. Obviously, that number would change if a fee was recommended from the tech committee and the board accepted what that fee would be. That would obviously change that payment requirement.
And we would not ask for any payment for this year at all, if we were to go that direction.
So what else would we be looking at probably adding to this? There's a tool, and we've gotten a lot of passion around it from the tech committee called GoGuardian. And there's a cost of that, which would be $35,000. That's an annual fee for GoGuardian. Now, what GoGuardian will do for us is GoGuardian has multiple features within it. The first is it will do content filtering. It's cloud-based content filtering, so the content would be content filtered at home. And that's the recommendation of the tech committee. So whatever the students can go to in school is the only thing they'll be able to go to at home. So they'll be content filtered just as they are in district, okay? It also is our anti-theft software. So if a device is missing, it can be, once the process on how we report an incident, we don't have all of that defined through the committee, but once that's done, it'll go to the tech department. The tech department can identify a device as missing, and then GoGuardian will tell us where it was the last time it was turned on and connected to the internet, and then also the next time it's turned on and connected to the internet. So it's interesting, we found a lot of Chromebooks with a lot of clients that we're working with, and it's a funny story. It was a district just a little north of here, 5th grade student, couldn't find their Chromebook, reported it, went through all the right channels, we turned on GoGuardian, we put it in, and we found out through Google Maps that it was in the right-hand corner of their house. Just happened to be where her bedroom is. So mom went in and looked under the bed and under a pile of clothes. Guess what was there? The Chromebook. So mystery solved. We actually recovered another one from a district out west where a student left mid-year, forgot to turn in the device, and we found out it was in Tennessee. Reached out to the parents, they shipped it back to us. So It's a good feature. It's not going to solve everything, but it's a way to track those devices as we know that there's a cost associated with it. Then,
Hey, Bill?
Yes, sir.
We have a request that you go back on the microphone.
Oh, sorry. So the second feature that GoGuardian brings us is it gives us that classroom management piece. So what that really helps us is think about the classroom and being productive, okay? Through classroom management, there's behavioral issues we can address. For instance, not every second of every day we're going to be using a Chromebook. But if I'm a teacher in the front of the room and I want the students' eyes front, but I see they're not paying attention, I can say eyes front, they're not listening. Eyes front, they're not listening. I can then go and with one keystroke turn off every Chromebook in my classroom. The other thing I can do is through thumbnails, I can see each Chromebook on that thumbnail and I can understand what students are on task or off task. And if a student's off task, I can push a little message to them and say, come on, get back to the right. And all of a sudden, when you're in a classroom and you see this and the student doesn't know it for the first time, the eyes open. It's like, and they're looking over their shoulder, like, what's going on? So that's a piece to it. But also teachers can then push things. So that's the behavioral piece. But talk about productivity. I've got young students in my classroom that are in 3rd grade. They may not be able to type every URL correctly. But rather than forcing them to type it right now and lose 5 minutes of educational time while I got to go around and help them type the right thing, I can push stuff to them. And it'll just pop up on their screen on their device. So it also gives that teacher a way to display student work through the projector by picking up whatever that student's device is and displaying it electronically. So it's got a lot of good tools. It does our content filtering. It allows us to do some classroom management and behavior. And then it also, I think the biggest piece, it's a productivity tool in the classroom. So any questions on that?
You said these are a 3-year lease?
This is a 3-year lease, and I think our goal would be to try and get 3.5. I think we're looking at a 3-year rotation, but because this is the first time in and we're launching half year, would be to try and get 3.5 years out of these devices.
How do we come up with 3.5? I'm asking because I have a son at the high school.
Yeah.
And they gave him a Chromebook at the beginning of the year, and they expect that Chromebook to make it through the whole of the high school. So that's a 4-year period there, and actually, when they're done, at the end of 4 years, that Chromebook is theirs. But I'm not advocating that. I'm just trying to find out how you came up with 3.5 years instead of 4, or, and then the other part is what do we do at the end of that 4-year life cycle? Where does that device go? To go back and get refreshed with a newer one?
So right now we're talking through some of those different scenarios. We are looking at a 3-year rotation, and it kind of makes sense when you start in 3rd, it'll take them to 6th, and then you're taking them through 5th, then we got 6, 7, 8. So we're on a rotation of kind of a 3-year there. The industry is showing that a good rotation right now is about a 3-year life cycle rotation. I think high schools that are, and we're seeing a lot of high schools that do 4-year just because the math is easier, okay? But there's also high schools that are on 3-year rotation as well. Now, as far as where the device goes at the end, if with a fair market value lease, there's options at the end of that could be addressed. We can say, hey, we can allow people to purchase it for whatever the value of the device is at that point in time, or we can just give it back to the lease company, and we don't have to worry about it, and we say, hey, we're at the end of our 3.5 year, we're at the end of our lease, what's the right device for us, okay? And we just move into the next one, because once we start to get into this model, we have to make sure it's sustainable. And one thing I have seen, because I am in districts where we are on our 2nd rotation, is that lease budget of $318,000 for devices, we're not going to have to worry about it covering what the new device will be 3 years from now, because if you look at technology and the way it's moving, devices are getting more powerful and costs are coming down on them, okay? So when we start to think about will this be sustainable over time, I truly believe it is, because we've got districts that bought old Chromebooks 3 years ago for that same dollar amount, and they're now getting this one. And their lease payment isn't changing, and that's the point I'm trying to make, okay? Is that it makes it a sustainable model. So it could be 4 years, but I think the committee is kind of looking at that 3-year rotation, because it does help us from a 3 through 5 and then a 6 through 8 model. I don't know if that answers your question.
Close enough.
Okay.
If I had more on this.
So I know it keeps going away, but I think I was really where, once we got to the budget, the next was really to get into questions and answers. And we do have some folks from the tech committee here as well. A lot of the administrators sit on it. But any questions?
Yeah, the whole group over there.
I do think they're doing amazing. Yes, sir.
Are there any districts that already have this and are operating with it right now?
The Chromebook environment, yes, a lot of districts.
I mean, the program that you have right now?
Yes, yes. So a district very similar in size, and actually your committee went and took a tour of them a couple of weeks ago, I believe it was. 2 weeks or last week? I don't remember. 2 weeks ago. Was Lamont 113A, okay? It's similar size district. It's a K-8 district, okay? They went through this process and they launched last December. So they're like 6 months ahead of you, okay? So we went, or your group went to go see where they are. Now they're not seeing a final product. They're seeing a district that's 6 months into this journey, okay? And yes, but we actually have...
Which is probably more interesting.
Yes, yeah.
We have teachers.
Do we have any information about the impact on students being on this program?
So it's interesting that you asked that question. There is not a study to date yet that we can look at and say putting technology in a student's hand increases test scores or academic growth. But what we can point to are numbers of engagement. Okay, student engagement is up. Homework assignments are turned in because they're in an environment that students are especially as we get into middle school, into the high school levels, that the work is being done. Student attendance is up. So I think when you start to look at it and you start to draw some conclusions, it's one of those where if our students are here, they're engaged, and they're doing their work, good things are going to happen. The data's not there yet, I guess is what I'm saying, but I think there's supplemental data that support it's the right way to go.
I guess I'd love to see that put into some kind of a scorecard maybe, just to select like what are the metrics that we're gonna look to ourselves to gauge this in this district over time. Maybe, 5 to 7 things that we think our hypothesis is they're gonna impact, and then we can track that over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Ancillary costs to go to one-to-one for the district. Be it subscription to a program that helps with, curriculum, in science or math or, foreign language or whatever. Are there enough programs out there that we can draw on? And is there, what are we looking at additional cost-wise that we may be looking at having to make a decision on as well?
That's a great question. So first let's talk about, you are and have been an Apple district, except for there are some Chromebooks throughout. One of the things with the newer Chromebooks that you're getting, they allow you to download Android apps to them. So the apps that were really good in the Apple world and in iTunes, okay, are now in the Google Play Store. They're just the Android version of it. Okay, so as we start to migrate some of those apps, or maybe change them because maybe there's a better Android app or a different one that we want to start to use, you already have kind of some existing budget that you're using for applications. I'm not going to say that's not going to have to increase a little bit, but there's budget that you have there that might get shifted for where you used to spend it in the Apple world, it might get moved into the Google world. And there will be some, professional development requirements early on that we're going to have to do. But again, you do have, most districts have professional development dollars set aside. It's just a choosing where you're going to spend some of those dollars.
So part of your question too was related to curriculum. And so Amanda and I have been working behind the scenes because we do have a number of our contracts that are up at the end of this school year. Our K-5, Amanda, help me if I misspeak, K-5 math program is up for renewal. And so the K-5 math program can be completely digital, it can be digital plus paper, it can be paper only. The cost is significantly different if it's digital only. And I'm sure you can understand it's much less than having printed. Our 6-8 math Carnegie is also up. The contract is due at the end of this school year. We need to make a decision. Again, they offer all of those kind of things, digital plus print, or just print. And so we want to make those decisions about what we're up for. We also have our science curriculum, which is called STEM Scopes. That also is ending this year. And so one of the things I said, we're working behind the scenes. And that right now is a completely digital. There is not a print component at all, and we're doing well with it. The behind the scenes work is that next week during our late start, the teachers are going to get surveys about all of those to get teacher feedback. And one of our questions is what platform do you think you're ready for? Would you like more? With support, not expecting anyone to be fluid as soon as we purchase it. But we are gathering the data, so before we start talking about renewals, we'll be able to look at costs and look at if we have a decision about this, that would impact us about what we can offer for students as well. The thing I love about the device that we're considering, the device type, thank you, is that if our textbook, for example, is online, students before they leave us would be able to download things onto their Chromebook. So they would be able to download the chapter or download the assignments, and then they don't need to have an internet connection at home to be able to work on it. And so for our families that don't have internet connection or a wireless or any of those things, we will have an answer for that they would be able to download all of the things onto their Chromebook. And then when they come back to school, as soon as they connect back with a wireless or go someplace that connects with a wireless, it would all upload and save automatically. So that was one of my concerns for students who didn't have access at home. Would they be lost without it? But we have a means to make that happen, and that was really important for the committee to hear about, that those are options for this device. The older devices didn't always let us do that.
Or the amount. So it was very limited on what you could store locally, where some of these now, they're really good. I use a Chromebook for business, and I haven't had any issues for the past 3 years.
So when I talk about all of those subscriptions that are ending, those are part of our budget on another side of our budget. But those would be continuing costs, but we would want to make good decisions based on. I am not a fan of all digital all the time, every moment. I think that was one of the belief statements, that we believe in a balanced approach, meaning not every class, every minute of every day needs to be with technology. But when it's a valuable tool, it's the right thing to use.
So, did you say that some of those subscriptions would be less, the more?
Some of them are significantly less.
Significantly less without the paper.
Okay.
They're significantly less, and most programs.
But you did a middle one, like the blended one, part paper, part digital.
Well, so we could decide if we maybe don't need paper for every student. Maybe we need for a third of the class who might benefit for that. Or maybe that we can have some available to the teacher at times. We also can print things from the digital site. So if there were certain pages. One of the things that we noticed that many times, in maybe moms and dads realize it too, is we don't use every page in a workbook. And my dear friend here said we shouldn't, and I completely agree with that. We shouldn't be using every page if it's not directly connected to what kids need at that moment. So the digital version allows us to print exactly what we need, and it's obviously much more cost effective.
Opportunity to offset some of these costs even for what I was getting.
Yeah, and a lot of the districts do that.
Most companies, if we decide to continue with the same program that we're using, or by some chance there is going to be a change, most companies offer the exact same model, all digital plus paper, paper only. So there are several options available.
Our science program does not have a paper. It's not even an option. So they have things that we can print, but there is not a book, there is not a workbook, there's nothing, because it's really meant to be a hands-on experience and not just to read or to fill out worksheets. So I love that part too. I don't know if that helped answer some of the questions.
And I have one more question. With us moving to the late exit model, would these gonna be able to be incorporated in that as well seamlessly to be enough support for that group?
STEM scopes, for example, is a toggle on every screen. You toggle between English and Spanish. So that's a fabulous solution for that.
Has the online component, everything. It's basically right now digital plus print, if you were to use that model.
So that's our Spanish language arts reading program, materials, books, and everything else that you could want. We already have that, so we've already paid for that. That's, we'd just be able to get access to, which is really amazing.
By when do you have to make that decision is what you're gonna do? At the end of this school year or February or what?
My friend John over here, it will be encouraging us to make the decision as soon as possible when we start looking at the budget process. But all of this timeline seamlessly fits into all of that. So we know that if we're going to have devices in February or March or next year, or January, that would all help us make those decisions. That wouldn't be a blocker at all to make any of those decisions.
I have two questions. One, will the committee be making a recommendation in terms of a fee? Is that something that you're still talking about and you'll be bringing that?
We'll be bringing that as part of the recommendation at the next board meeting.
Okay, great. And the second question is, can I get Go Guardian for my house?
Unfortunately, no.
Actually, you get it when you get the tech.
Yeah, that's right. That's true.
Because they're not gonna want
So I'm on the idea of ancillary costs as well, but as it relates to the suitability or the readiness of our networks to accommodate the additional traffic, and Joe might be able to best answer this. I feel like we went through something not too long ago in anticipation for this moment.
Yeah, we've been building the network out for the last 4 years in anticipation for this. So we went through that 3-year phase, and then the 4th year was the wireless. So we have a ton of wireless. We've got one wireless access point in every classroom and 4 in the gym and out in the open areas, and then we still have some in reserve in case we need more capacity. So we're very well connected at this point.
And one other thing, as I look at this quote, I'm cheap, so I tend to look at a quote and think that's the list price, right? And then there's room to go down from there. Tell me a little bit about what this price is. Is there a possibility of reducing this? Is there comparison shopping to be done? Every $10 decrease in the bundled cost of the device is about $25,000 to the district per year. So
It's a great question. What I can tell you is probably very firm is the Chromebook Management license. It is what it is. It's going to be around that $26. The warranty is $54. The one thing that could be a variable is the device cost. And right now, that was based on what the market value is today, not in November, okay? And we're also trying to make sure that we're leveraging, right now we have yourself, we have East Moline School District, and we have Rossville School District that are all around the same time frame. So we're talking to vendors to say, hey, this is not gonna come as one PO, but if we can, this is going to be individual purchases, but if we can talk about a volume from these three, and East Moline is about the same size as you guys. They'll be in that 2,500. So I'm trying to leverage my clients that I'm working with right now to say, hey, how do we go get the best price? I could see that number come down. I'm just being conservative right now. What I'm trying to present is what this budget looks like, where we are today. But certainly when it's time that we can go, I'm not selling you any of this. Okay, I'm just working with vendors to help you get the best price.
what kind of vendors are we talking about? CDW?
They're one. There's a group out of Milwaukee that's called TRA. There's Tiger Direct. There's a number of them that we'll go out and we'll get pricing with. The problem is with Chromebooks is that often the first vendor you talk to registers you as a potential sale, which then it doesn't make it necessarily a fair bidding war everywhere else. So we want to be selective before we go out and we say, you know, we want the rumor mill, not the, hey, we're ordering, to try and get that price down as far as we can. I wouldn't be surprised to see that move $5 to $10 by the time we get ready to order. I can't guarantee it, but I would not be surprised to see it do that.
Is it fair to say this is the ceiling?
I think it's very close to the ceiling unless the committee comes back and says, hey, this device just got released and we really like it, and it's $315 a unit. But based on the world we know today, this is one of the better ones out there, or this price range for the set that we're looking for, this the abilities and the specs of the device.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you.
So a term you might consider using in your business, a last known position or something. In the Navy, when you're chasing submarines and you lose contact, that position is called data, D-A-T-U-M. Some officers' clubs are called data, it's the last known position of the person.
No, I'm not next. I was just kidding. No, I'm not yet.
Right, let's chair.
Sorry. Thanks, Mom.
Thank you for the presentation. That was very helpful.
Thank you.
Oh, dear, sorry.
Next, we have our board reports. Anyone?
I don't have a board report, I just have a state request that we, evaluating our parking lots for any patch work that might need to get done. There's a big crack in the parking lot out here at GMS that's about as wide as my foot. So just a little, risk reduction maybe.
Okay.
Look at the parking lot, see if anything needs to be done before they shut the, plants down.
Sure will. Got that one down, John? Got it.
Ellen, go ahead.
So at the, talking about parking lots, the back parking lot at Frederick is paved. They will be striping it, I assume, tomorrow or Friday. Then over the weekend, the front parking lot will be seal coated and striped. And then with the hopes that not next week, but the following week, we will begin the new process. So we've ordered signage. We're working on, well, the staff will have a week, 4 days, of the new parking directions before we start. But we're getting a good process in place, and we'll all be out there with our little, what do you call them? Those vests, bright yellow vests, helping get everybody in the direction they need to go. So, and the parent, Eric will get the parent communication out. We'll put it on the website. We'll put it on the sign in front of the school. So, in a couple of weeks, we'll be ready for it. Yes. And Prairie View is now totally connected with our solar. So they're working on the solar. We're still waiting for ComEd's approval for Frederick. I don't know what's holding that up, but and the fencing should be, they ordered all the materials for the rest of the fencing at Frederick, and that should be in soon, and then we'll get that up. The fencing at Prairie View is completed, and Park's almost done, and we start GMS in a couple of weeks. So we're on a roll.
At some point, can we get a tour of the,
Yes.
all the stuff?
Yes.
See what it is, I'd love to see.
Yeah, I'll put it right down.
Okay,
That's all I have.
awesome. The Evaluation Assessment Curriculum Committee?
Next time it'll meet October 11th, and the Diversity Committee will meet October 24th.
Easy enough. In that case, we'll move on to the consent agenda. So if I could have a motion to approve the consent agenda, including the addendum to the personnel report.
So moved.
Second.
Are there any questions? Okay.
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Mesco,
Aye.
Knack,
Aye.
Weedman.
And just a handful of action items. Could I have a motion to approve the increase of substitute pay to $110 per day?
Second.
Any questions? We did talk about this at the last board meeting, so. Okay.
Weedman.
Aye.
Mesco.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
Braden.
Aye.
LaCroy.
Abstain, please.
Strack.
Aye. Motion carries. Next, we have a motion to approve the purchase of a pickup truck for O&M.
Move.
Second.
Questions?
Assume they found one?
Pardon me?
I assume they found one, or they going out to bid?
That's a good question, do you know?
We do have one, to say it is on order implies that we already have it reserved for us, but the dealership is aware that we're going through this process and they do have one set aside for us, should we get approval to purchase it.
So it should be a quick turnaround when it gets here.
And this action tonight is to approve the one for now. We talked about getting on some sort of a schedule.
So, right, that's gonna be our next step. As soon as, yeah, Keith is out for a while, so did a little too much dancing and blew out his knee, so. Not that I would say it publicly or not,
Oops.
but. Oh, my goodness.
Okay. LaCroy.
Aye.
Braden.
Aye.
Strack.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
Weedman.
Aye.
Mesco.
Aye.
Motion carries. And lastly, could I have a motion to approve the addition of one FTE special education teacher at Woodview?
So moved.
Second.
Any questions?
New student, right?
Many new students, many. So without, the current number of special ed teachers at Woodview are all over their state allotted numbers. So
Is there a general area they're coming from, or do we know that?
just moved it, no, just, they're all move-ins. We had, last week, we had 4 students move in, one day, all with IEPs.
Hmm.
So,
Okay. Strack.
Aye.
Mack.
Aye.
Braden.
Aye.
LaCroy.
Aye.
Mesco.
Aye.
Weedman.
Aye.
Motion carries. Unfinished business, the discussion of the Grays Lake Park District contract.
we were asked to analyze the costs and the revenue to see, are we charging what we need to charge? Do we have enough to cover our costs? And John did a great job really looking at the square footage and the utilities and the cost of having a custodian available. And as it turns out, we were pretty good. There was just a $3,000 difference between what the costs were and the revenue that came in. $3,000 to the good. But we also have to remember that if there's anything broken, we have to cover that. There are sometimes, balls that are broken or lost, or pieces of equipment that needs to be fixed. So at this point, I think we don't need to increase our costs or decrease them. However, I would recommend that we continue to look at this because with solar energy, our cost of our utilities will decrease. So it's something to keep in mind, and we'll monitor this more frequently. Maybe we can do this even on a monthly basis so that we can be able to come back. And usually, I think the agreement with the Park District is if any changes have to be recommended by January. So I don't think there's any recommendation for this year, but you might want to look at that next year, one way or the other. There are fewer students participating too. The number of participation has gone down. There's just so many activities for kids now that I think.
So do we want to notify them that we are not raising?
Yeah, I will. I didn't want to do that until after they know we're talking about it. So as far as the contract itself goes, we don't see any need for any changes. We have a very good relationship with the Grays Lake Park District.
And philosophically, our position is we want to be good neighbors and provide these facilities, but we want to cover our costs, basically.
Right. We're not in it to make money. We're just there to cover our costs, right? And I was very pleased that we came so close. I don't know that we would have been in the past, but right now we haven't increased the cost, I don't think, for about 3 years.
Yeah, it's been a few
Do
years.
we also use the Park District?
Pardon me?
Do we use Park District land?
No, not for, well, yes, at Meadowview. And at GMS for the fields, correct? So, yeah.
John, what are our costs what are the key drivers for our costs for operating our facilities, or letting the Parks District use our facilities. Just the utilities, they have the heat on. Tell me a little bit about that.
I mean, it's basically the electric, so the heat and the lights. We actually went so far as to factor in even things like repair costs and bulb replacements in the gyms. Like, we went pretty in depth for all the way down to toilet paper.
I was just gonna say toilet paper.
So we factored in almost every single cost that we could possibly think of. Like, what does it actually cost us to have this gym open at any point in time? And when you look at the comparison of that to how often they use it, the square footage that they use, the times that they use it, that's how we kind of came up
And
with
the
our
custodial at night.
Yes, and that was another driving factor, was our custodial staff that has to be available to open it and lock it. That was probably, I was shocked, that was actually one of our larger expenses in general for it, so.
So could we put that on for approval for the next?
Yeah, I think that's fine. Okay, next are the recommendations for the evidence-based funding dollars.
No, I just want to do it.
I put the screen over there. Put the screen on that side of the room.
Hey, Joe. Yeah. Okay, so our, turn the lights. Yeah, okay. So our committee has been looking at, administrative been looking at, how we're gonna use this. We got 400,000 that we got last year, the evidence-based money went for early kindergarten, which was one of the board's priorities. This year, we got 898,000. Again, that has to go to those 27 elements. So we looked at where our gaps were, and as I had explained before, with our two schools being designated in the area of EL, we wanted to make sure that we looked at that area as well. I forgot, sorry. So the first thing that we looked at was the nurse, and we have a lot of growing needs, medical needs within our district. The gap between what we have and what the state says we should have are 3 FTEs. We are recommending that we add 1 nurse now and then look at and monitor, is that enough or do we need more? So we would like to add 1 FTE nurse. That would come up to about $72,000 with benefits. Obviously, these costs are within a range. We'd also like to add a social worker behavior specialist, somebody who would go through the district and go to the classrooms where there were students that have some significant behavior problems and work with them to train the staff and then allowing the rest of the students to focus on their academics. And I can say that this week being at one of the buildings and covering, we desperately need that. That's what I've done all week. Thank goodness I have a special ed background. And so staff just aren't trained to deal with some of the behaviors that we're getting. And it's not only behaviors of students that may just not understand how to behave in school, but we have students that are coming from different cultures. And they may be from a culture where being aggressive to each other is okay. And then all of a sudden we get to school in the United States and that's not acceptable. So there's a lot of different things that we need to put in place. So we would like to add a social worker behavior specialist that does also address one of our gaps. It suggested that we needed 9 FTE in that area, and we're suggesting adding 1 right now. And then you've heard our technology proposal tonight, and the cost would be about $350,000. The way they define the gap in technology is so much per student. I think it's $125 per student. We do have some devices, so I took the difference between them. We're still under what the state suggests. Stephanie is doing a lot of work with data entry and tracking the performance that's required by the state. And we really need Stephanie to be out in the classrooms, working with teachers, brand new teachers. So another request would be to have an administrative assistant, a clerical person there to do the data entry. If you look under pupil support for EL, we are, again, the gap is 3.64 people. We're asking for 1 to use those fundings. Okay, why am I not going down here? Hold on. We're getting there. There we go. This is all for this year. We talked about the kindergarten test, readiness test, kids assessment, and the students that were at Avon did not score well. That does not mean that there are not students, that the Avon kindergarten is not doing well. It means those kids were not coming to school ready for kindergarten. So we talked about having a sort of a jump up pre-K program at Avon for a week, bringing them in, kids that are EL students who've never had any pre-K experience, bringing them in a week or 2 before school and giving them that experience, helping them understand that they need to come in and sit at a chair and a desk, and that there's going to be walking down the hall together and some of the experiences that you would get. So with that, we would need a bilingual teacher, a monolingual teacher, 1 assistant. We'd have some busing, and it would be a half-day program with snack. So we're going to bring them in and give them that experience that they might not have. We used to do this probably 3 or 4 years ago, but financially we couldn't do it anymore, so we stopped that program. And then there's some supplementary literacy materials. Now, if you add this all up, it doesn't come up to our $898,000. However, we can carry that over, and my suggestion then for the rest of those dollars would be actually begin in the 1920 school year. So it's still using the $898,000 that we have this year, but carrying it over. At that point, again, because we're the EL area is where we're really focusing, we'd have an assistant to help Stephanie out in the classrooms. According to the gap, we're behind by 5.39 FTE. Again, we're only going to ask for 1 for right now. And then an EL interventionist. So we have interventionists to help with math and reading, but we don't have anybody that speaks Spanish that can help those students who only speak Spanish or have very limited English. We don't have any way to help them with their interventions. And then the final area that we are considering is the 2 additional instructional coaches. And according to the gap identified by the staff, we should have 11 more instructional coaches, but we'll start with 2. That would take pretty darn close to the $198,000, but then we have to remember that we may get the same amount again for next year. So at the same time, we're still looking at what direction we would do in the following year. Any questions?
What would the next steps be as far as so are these individual things that don't need to approve?
Right. I would bring it back next board meeting. We would have each one as individual. I would think that you'd want to do individual voting, not just as a group, especially with the technology. I think that should be separated out. But yeah, I think I would have a recommendation for each of these, especially since some of them are for this year now and some are for the following year.
When you talk about the growing needs of students with medical issues, I don't expect to have this at your fingertips. But are these things more allergies and that type of thing?
Allergies, diabetes. Well, those are the 2. Pardon me? Asthma. Yeah.
I think the most alarming thing to people should be the gaps that
Yes.
For instance, almost 12 instructional coaches, you know, 5 EL coaches, so,
And the nurses.
right. And it's,
Well, their recommendation is to have one nurse for every building. Now, we have health clerks, but the recommendation by the state is one nurse per building. And it, you know, sometime we want to look, we might need that and not have health clerks in the buildings, but right now we want to take these one step at a time.
is there anything on this list that anyone on the board objects to? That's that question.
Well, there's a lot of stuff there. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, there is.
I've got to ponder on some of this.
Sure.
There's an old adage that if you add as close to the classroom as possible. But if there are some things that are happening here that detracts from a teacher's ability to teach the rest of the class, that's got to be dealt with.
Right.
And I have to wade through some of this and really think it through, because that's a lot of stuff to ponder.
You know where I am.
Yeah. But there are things that, you know, every single day, there's kids in the room that are being cheated. If that's something happening that shouldn't be happening, the teacher has to spend his or her time on that. So we have to deal with it.
Well, I think it's okay.
Okay, great. Thank you. Aha.
Yes. New business. We're going to be starting with negotiations again with both unions. This will only be regarding salaries. So it theoretically shouldn't take as long as an ordinary negotiation would, because it's limited to that topic. We will be talking in closed session tonight about parameters of that, but in the past, in the more recent negotiations, it's been Jim and I at the table with Kevin and Ellen and oh yeah, and David Northern, and Chris at the time. Now would be John. So if there's no objection to continuing in that way, we can do that. If you'd like to juggle the roster, we can do that too. But we can, you know, so if you want to think about that, that's fine. But
Then we always report back to
Yeah.
the whole group of what happened. So you're not like left out of the loop and we're just doing everything. We report back to you and it's a 7-person board decision on yay or nay on any one of those parts. We don't make those, whoever's in the committee doesn't make that final decision right then and there.
Yeah.
If you feel it. Brought back to everybody to vote on and have their say.
And typically, it's an open invitation at each session for all board members to attend. And so we'd be in one room, the negotiations would be in another room, and then their union is in another room. So so we come back to the room that, you know, our home base basically, and chat about whatever is on the table and handle it that way. So
It starts November 12th.
starts November 12th, right? So it's a little over a month from now.
Could you refresh me on what the last, did you not do a 2-year?
The language itself of the contract was for
4 years.
4 years.
With 2 years only on financials.
Yeah, but the financials are only 2 years, so we're at I guess we're halfway through that contract.
Okay, so you're starting for
Yeah.
the contract that'll start next fall.
As far as the salary.
For
goes.
just salaries.
Yeah. So in 2 years, we'll have to do the whole ball of wax. So, are there any questions? Other questions about it? Like I said, we'll have a quick chat about it tonight as far as numbers go. But okay. Thank you. Future agenda items.
Well, we'll have approval for each of those items that I brought tonight. And I don't have much more on here other than that. There must be something.
Well, no.
Pardon me? It is at Park, right? No?
Park results.
Park results. Oh, well, we can have it at Park, because I think it's at Park that night, too. Yes, so the presentation would be Park results.
Can you remind us when the next search update will be from the?
Yes, you're going to have a meeting on November 13th.
Sounds right, yeah.
Yes, and so at that time, they'll bring 10 to 12 candidates, not the people, but their resumes and talk through
Okay, so
that.
that's the next touch.
Yep. Mhm. You're welcome.
A few meetings down the road, I'd like to see a little study on fee structures, maybe comparison with other districts or whatever, and see where we are in comparison.
When you say fee structures, as far as,
Extracurricular activities, the things that parents
Okay.
have to pay an extra check for
Sure.
or whatever. I'd just like to see where we are with the typical districts in this area.
okay, sure.
You might as well add the beginning of the year fees too.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
If we're gonna be looking at the technology part on it. If we're gonna have to bundle something, we might have to
Right.
make some adjustments.
Okay,
That's not next meeting.
No, no.
down the road.
got it. Well, we're going to have to look at the registration fees soon anyway, so this will be a good
Okay.
Yeah.
start.
Are there any public comments?
Come
Can you
on.
use a microphone, please?
Hi, I'm Jill Tarnowski. I am the information specialist at Woodview School, and I'd like to thank you for thank Bill for that presentation today. But I also wanted to toss out one of the things in our discussion today is with the added number of those devices, is that we might need some more assistance with care and taking care of those. We currently have 5 technology, what's their proper term?
District tech.
District technology, or district technicians that help us troubleshoot things. So with the increased number of devices, we might have to increase the number of technicians, maybe 1 per building, something like that. With Park having almost double population, may have to have 2. So that might be the addition of 3 total. Just something to take under consideration.
Okay. Thanks, that's a good point. Thank you. Yeah, maybe we can, if the committee should consider that as.
And we have, it's in the,
Okay.
we were probably going to bring something back to you.
Good. There's nothing further, then if I could have a motion to enter into closed session pursuant to the sections of the Open Meetings Act listed in the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Mesco,
Aye.
Mack,
Aye.
Strack,
Aye.
Weedman, Braden.
Aye.
Motion carries.